Hello there, today we are tackling horns, hard, layering, hard, and doing it on larger monstrous horns, even more difficult. Wrong, wrong, wrong. We're gonna make this very simple. Don't be scared, you might even learn something about layering that makes it way more approachable than you've ever thought it was. And whether you're looking to paint horns or not, there's something in this video for everyone that you can take away, and we've got some little extra explanations at the end to kind of back things up and make it a little bit less intimidating as well, and prove you don't need to worry as much as you think you do. Let's jump in. So very quickly, paint selection. Not every paint used painting bone has to have the name bone or skeleton or bleached in it. You can see only two of these. They are two fantastic colors, Screaming Skull, weak paint, and Ivory, strong paint. They've got bony names. The rest of them are just, I quite like stony ones. And in fact, subbing in another stony one, that wasn't on purpose. Subbing in stuff that's a little bit more desaturated and less yellowy can look really good. Top tip, number one, if you're copying the box, copy the box. So get really, really close. Surprisingly stony, right? He stood on stone and there's very little difference between this and this. And if we were to hold up like Screaming Skull, not that close. So yeah, try making an educated decision. Some paints are weaker. These are often going to be layers, and some brands are stronger, like AK is really strong. I would recommend using strong ones at the beginning. If you're using weak ones, it can make it harder to get a mix right. So be mindful of that, but at the end, they can be helpful if you're trying to be subtle or do blending or anything like that. If you're doing very final highlight, like little dots or something, I tend to choose something quite strong anyway, like that. Right, superstar paint, nothing to do with skeletons or bones. That is definitely going to get used. It will be useful. If you want to make something more drab and dark, just add black. Not rocket science. All right then, let's jump in. Just a note too, you don't have to use literally the paints I'm using. We're going to cover a method over the paints. Of course you can use my paints. Any questions you've got about alternates or anything like that, pop them below. If you don't know if your paint is strong or matte, pop the paint below. I know all of them. Happy to help out in any way, shape or form. Okay, so we're gonna base coat this. I'm gonna stipple it. You could wet blend it. I have a video on smaller horns that I'd recommend you guys watch after this if you want some follow-up viewing. That's really, really good. You can follow that if you want to do this without stippling. However you do it, it's fine. The point is, the colors are important. Whether it is smooth is not important whatsoever, so don't worry. One drop of water off the back of the brush in the pad. It's quite a big drop for a small brush, so I'll work it in thoroughly. Should look like that. Slightly damp finger, not a wet one. Always test it on your palette, see how it is, and let's go. So step one is we're going to base coat with our mid-tone. If you've got a sprayed model from like a colored primer or something, maybe you don't have to worry about this. You can make that call, but we just need to get a base coat down that's nice to work over. And it's easier to do lighter things over something that isn't black. We're doing the horn first. It doesn't matter if we get bits over other areas. That's fine. Let's get rocking and rolling. Literally only needed one coat of the brown. It's one of the reasons for picking that paint in particular. We've got a Baden Black, still dried bark, Sandry Dust. Again, we've chose this because it's a base, it's a bit stronger. I prefer the color of Character Stone, but I want the strength of this. We've got Ivory. If you want to make things look less yellow and colorful, just adding black will be fine. So we're going to do light bits first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go light at this end rather than this end, because it's easier to get high contrast between light stuff and what's going to be darkish armor. And it also means that at the end, if that's dark, we can put some really striking lines on and a dot on the end and the tips, which look very cool. So I've made a decision that it's going to make it easier for us to make our painting look better. Working smart, not hard, name of the game. Okay, so taking a little bit of the paint, just want to make a mix. There we go. Pull the brown until I'm happy. That's fine. You're going to obscure a load of this anyway, so people worry about getting mixes perfectly right and consistent always. Literally at step 1 of like 7, don't worry about it, it's fine. Just worry about whether your stuff's going in the right place. Roughly the right colors in roughly the right place. That's all we need. I'm stippling and smushing this. Remember, you can layer it, you can do whatever it is you are comfortable with, because it's not whether it's super smooth that matters. That's why I think stippling is the best option, but whatever you are happy with. Wait for it to fully dry between steps. That's important. Right, not smooth, not perfect, but fine. Very simple now. I'm gonna add a little bit of Ivory. Now, Ivory is strong, as we mentioned, so I might have gone a bit too much there. Rather than adding more paint to counter it and screwing up my brush, I'm just gonna remove it onto the pad. This is why I like having a texture palette to work with. Take a little bit more water carefully. We're going to dilute it because that will make it less strong. Stipple, stipple. If we obscure anything, you can carefully put back in the previous step. And again, you're not aiming for perfection, guys. That's not the aim of the game here. It will all be fine, I promise. All right, that actually looks pretty good already. Hope you agree with that. It is not perfect. The closer we get, the worse it's gonna look. That's not gonna matter once we've done what we're doing next. We've not got high contrast though, so I've added the light stuff. I give my brush a little bit of a wash because I don't want my ivory making my black look like a strange pastel-y black gray thing. So we've washed the brush a little bit. Take the black, dilute it, and then starting on the very end where it's gonna be the darkest, pop it down, take some water, take a little brown. The black's quite weak, which is quite helpful in this actually. And then we can even use a finger to wipe off mistakes. That looks pretty good, actually, considering, so we can only make it better. Dry brush away now. You could dry brush at this step, but I'm kind of tempted to now I've said it, but we're not going to. I'm gonna commit to showing you how not intimidating layering is. I'm gonna be using a chunky brush. This is a 2M. Let me show you in comparison to a normal 2. Shorter, more sturdy. It flops around less. It holds less paint, which is the major negative of shorter brushes. It's gonna be fine. Right, so we need to get approximately what we were working with. And very simply, so we can highlight the edges if we want. You can highlight it GW style, or you can take a picture beforehand and copy what the light's doing, or you can do a mix. My method is I'm gonna do some edges, and I'm also gonna hit areas that face upwards. So first highlight, even if it doesn't look like this is doing much, make sure your color is lighter than the color you're going over. I don't need to use this on the top sections because they're light already. I'll hit those when I've added more ivory to the mix. But yeah, so I'm just blobbing it in, and it's very important to do this step because if we jump up too fast to the other one, it'll be very obvious if we make a mistake. This way, you're making it easier for ourselves, just like when we do it with dry brushing. The transition colors are important. Take a little bit more ivory, add it to the mix. Ivory is strong, so you don't need much. You notice I didn't add a load of water in or anything there. That's because I'm quite happy with how my paint is, so just a little bit of paint will keep it in a good space. I'm putting it next to it. I'm color matching now. I'm not just blobbing it on the mini. I think that looks good. It is good. All right, so we tested using our eyes. We looked at whether things looked like they were gonna fuck up, and then because they looked good, when we put them down, we're less likely to fuck up. That's magic, isn't it? Anyone can do that. If you're doing this at home, I'm doing it with a camera in front of my face. It's awkward. Insert picture of me highlighting next to my nose. I'd recommend you get it really close to your face. Get your light in the right place. Brace your elbows or brace your wrists, and just make sure that things are steady and stable. Hold your breath too. I had a little bit too much ivory in, so I'm gonna be careful. And I remembered that there's bottom bits to these horns, so we're gonna test it there. Yeah, it's a little bit too light. I think it's okay. Should be good for the tops of the horns though. So we're hitting a large part of the areas that are the lightest. And then as we get lower down, you can just do the edges. Don't have too much paint on your brush. Make sure the paint that's there will leave easily. If you're somewhere that's hot, don't wait around for ages because the paint will probably dry on the tip of your brush. Okay, that step's done a lot of work. So as you can see, we're pretty confident with putting a lot down at the top. We're putting less down at the bottom. And really, I'm only having to concentrate the most at the bottom where we're being precise. So that's when I hold my breath, get it close to my face, make sure that, I do those steps once I've been confident here that there's the right amount of paint on the brush. That's really important. Gonna add a little bit more ivory. And I think soon, probably, as wonderful as this brush is, it's gonna be time to move on to a much smaller one, and we'll drop down dramatically in size, very dramatically. I might have, again, added too much ivory because it's strong. Test it somewhere that's gonna be very light. Pretty sure we've got the right amount on the brush. Yeah, tippity tip, a little stroke, and I'm just placing the end triangle of the brush on and dragging it towards me. We are now at a stage where we can do some dots. And these dots are going to do a lot of work, and they're going to make us look like we're better painters than we are. That is always the aim. At the top, of course, you can put down a little bit more. Make sure your miniatures are at the right angle to make it helpful for you. Thank you, sir. You've done your job well. I'm going to show you how I clean my brushes. I get comments on this at shows. So I grind my brushes into the side of the cup. like that, but I'm always pulling upwards. So I'm never pushing the bristles down in an unhelpful motion. That will do a lot to agitate stuff. We've used quite heavy paints here. And then same again, into my palm, just pull away always, never push towards. And you can do the same with some soap involved. We've got soap in all of our sets. This is how my brushes last for a long time. And I'm not light with them in use. Not these brushes at least. I am fairly light with taking paint. These you got to get paint all over, and the shorter ones it's easier to get it down into the ferrule, so that's important. Buy good brushes, look after them, they will last 10 times longer than bad brushes. Okay, so size comparison, I promised you actually. We're dropping all the way down. This is an old 00 as well, so it's shrunk because they just lose bristles over time. This is a few years old, gone all the way from a 2M to a 00S. This will put down smaller dots in more precise places. So it's kind of nice to save this feeling of like an instant level up for control. It's hard to put too much paint on these. If you do, you'll know about it because it'll leave very fast. So don't overload them and kind of blob them. Okay, looking good. Right, dot time for some of it at least. Let's see. Yeah, maybe we are at dots. We'll do one and we can cover it over if we're not at dots. So, too much paint. Test first. Idiot. There we go. It happens to us all, guys. I should know what I'm doing, shouldn't I? There we go, little dot there. This is harder on camera. Definitely one of the more tricky tasks in real life and on camera. And where you can, because the shape of the model, might be able to get away with just using the side of the brush. On the larger sections, you don't need to worry nearly so much. Hopefully I've not jumped up in color too much. I might have. Yeah, so this is a really good example. That looks worse because I jumped up too aggressively. I didn't have enough of my previous color in the brush, so it doesn't look worse because I did it worse, although I didn't do it perfectly. It looks worse because I could have had a small amount of brown in the paint or something, you know? Might not be your control, it might be your decisions, okay? And if something goes wrong, don't just think, oh, I'm pause. There we go. See, I don't need to paint as well because I left a little bit of the previous color in, and that makes stuff look more coherent. Work smart, not hard. It's almost done now. Same again, more ivory, shrink it, dot carefully. You need less and less down here and less here, although you'll be doing more at the top because we've still got more space to go lighter. Starting to look very cool though. Final dots now, pure ivory. I'm gonna try and do one of these really carefully. Too big. They always go worse on camera. Again, you can always mix in a bit of your previous color. Things looking too bright, which those maybe are, or you can do a line leading up to it. Better. Either of them will work. Now, something that looking at a reference will tell you is that actually it can be worth dotting the recesses of horns where they point out. I know that sounds contradictory, but you can see here that I've actually chosen to put a little dot in these sections because where it curves on something shiny like bone, it would be reflecting the light there. And a little step like that can make a really big difference to making something look realistic. Quick word, guys, on how much paint should be on your brush for doing careful steps. Very, very, very little. Look at this. We're going to dry out. Right, I'm struggling to get paint to leave that brush. Okay, I've got to push it against the edge quite a lot to make something come off, but that means it's harder for me to put too much on. So it's about limiting your capacity or the ease at which you can make a mistake. Think carefully about it. Brush isn't big, brush isn't overloaded. The paint that's there is strong, but there's not too much. This is an old brush that I'm very used to as well. I've picked something I'm very comfortable with. That's made it much easier. There we go. This bit here is a bit fat. Made a slip there at the end. So yeah, maybe I would consider a kind of, I could put some brown over it or something to soften it a bit. So I'm just talking about stuff that I could show you. So here's fixing mistakes. Gonna do it with a brown. It's a bad. Sorry, a black, that's a bad and a brown, that's dry buck. Take a titty tad. Right, soften it with some water in the brush. And again, exactly what I was saying about the edge highlighting, not too much. Right, let's say we want to redarken a section. I don't actually have a mistake here to fix, so I better be careful. We'll darken this section, push it. Down with the finger as well, right? You slipped into a recess that you didn't want to, pop it down. It's okay, you can fix your mistakes. Do not worry. It is amazing what you can do with a good brush that doesn't have too much paint on it. Trust me. All right, so we have a bloopy here. Here's one I made earlier situation going on. I want to break down why highlighting is less scary than you think and why highlighting and blending added together makes everything less scary. So each is going to lower the requirements on the other. So what I have here is two representations of fantastically drawn / painted horns. Thank you, I know they're masterpieces. Anyway, why do Games Workshop highlight like every edge, facing upwards, facing down, whether it's realistic or not? And why do they dot a load of stuff? And basically a large part of the reason for that is it makes things readable. You can tell where one thing begins and where that ends. It's clear and it's helpful when models are small, because they are small. Makes it very easy to distinguish what's going on. The other one is distraction, right? So this horn is blended. I've gone through the colors on the way to each other, and this one is just blocks. You can't really tell the difference between the two, especially at a glance or on a gaming table or something like that, because mostly you're looking at these great big squares that I've put on them, which are representative of the GW artwork for this piece that I'll put up here. So they look like that, pretty much. One is blended and one is just blocked in. So this is layering and that's blending. And the moment you put the distraction on, stuff gets easier. So I quickly do a little bit of drawing. Now, one thing you can do, if you don't want to do like fancy blending, which is what we're doing, is just stipple here. Get this and stipple it on that a bit, or get that and stipple it on that a bit, or get a mix between the two of them. And then rather than mixing all your blends or whatever, you mix it and then you just tap it on the edges, and that will do a lot for your transitions. You can glaze that as well, but that takes a little bit longer. Or you can use washes in some situations. We're using stippling because it's nice and easy. Right, let's start our distraction tactics. So the moment we start doing this, which will be very, very, very rough indeed, it's much harder for you to look at the stuff that was on below them. And each additional layer of detail we add, which don't need to be like mega precise or anything until the very tips, they're gonna make things potentially easier. One hair dry later. So if we put lines inside our lines, obviously you could be doing this in the outlines or something, it's going to get harder and harder to look at the blend that is behind them. Obviously you can do this on this and it'll make a pretty good blend look like a really good blend. We're going to make no blend look like some blend. So this is available at whatever speed you're going at, whatever requirements you have for your army or your time investment you can give. You can do it fancy on a character, you can do it basic on something else. Add some dots in at the very end. Boop. And all of that is going to pull attention away from the blending that we have or haven't done in the background. So if you add these together, the edge highlighting makes it more forgiving on your blend because it's harder to look at it and pull the problems apart. And your blend gives a nice background to your edge highlighting. And as long as you're using some transitional steps, so you're mixing a little bit of your gray with your white in this case, each thing will make that other easier. You don't have to do, highlight upwards and downwards facing areas the same like Games Workshop do either. Just upwards facing areas, it's up to you how you want to approach it. You can do a mix of both of them. And sometimes you can just do rule of cool and do whatever you think is going to look the best on the piece in question. It's very hard to ignore repeated patterns, right? It's just human nature. You're there to spot repeated patterns and spot breaks in them. If your breaks are underneath a more obvious pattern, the distraction will work. So it's just about tricking eyes, basically. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you feel like continuing the theme of Chaos Horns, why not check out a tutorial that we did on this guy that's been mentioned a couple of times in this one. It's also got a fantastic section on dry brushing high quality metallics. Yes, these were dry brushed. Turned out really, really, really nicely, and it's such a cool mini. Why not give that a little look? And also pop a suggestion down below for something you'd like to see us trying to break down and make less intimidating, like we have the last couple of videos. Cheers, we'll see you in the next video.